Skip it up and that up. So this is going to be a really off-the-cuff video. I just came across this article and I've been taking notes for the last 40 minutes because it's really a rant or vlog on Cinema Blend. It was written by Ryan Winslet, and it's a really good read because I just took cliff notes from it, and there's going to be some things I'm not going to talk about to keep this video shorter. So go look in the description below. I always include a link to what I'm talking about, at least a link, sometimes multiple ones, to show where I got my information from. So you could always check out in the description if you want to read more into what I'm talking about. And I suggest, especially with this one, that you do, because like I said, I'm not going to talk about everything because this will end up being a 30-minute video. But this guy, Ryan Winslet, sounds like he is almost to the year my age. He's in his early 30s. And he writes, his title of this article is 2015 the year I quit gaming? And there's some things I want to talk about that he said because they're very interesting. And it's so true. It kind of ties into my really old video now, if I could find it again. I'm sure, I know I still have it. Why I hate the word gamer. I'll have a link to that either in an annotation in the video or below in the description as well. So let's get into it. So he grew up in the same time I did, in the 80s. I was born in 1981, and it sounds like he was too. And he's right. In the 80s, games were seen as kids' toys. They were seen by my parents, and even parents today, which are people that are my age. They're seen as these like game consoles, especially back then, because the graphics were rudimentary, so was the sound. They seemed like cutesy kids' toys, and they seemed like something that you were meant to grow out of. Now, the interesting thing about gaming, unlike other toys, like dolls, or like I had Teddy Ruxpin back then, is that gaming grew up. That's the thing that a lot of people who have that stereotype that gaming is for kids, but they didn't realize is gaming didn't stop with the Nintendo Entertainment System or the Sega Master System. Gaming, the hardware evolved, the technology evolved, and like kids, the kids grow up into adult men and women. Gaming has grown up into an adult platform. But because of what gaming was almost 30 years ago now, there's still that stereotype and stigma that gaming is for children. And when people hear there are people my age that still play video games, they think, oh, that's a child's pastime. You're still playing Super Mario Brothers, or sitting on the floor with your legs crossed Indian style playing Super Mario Brothers 2. And that to me is very frustrating because even though the gaming industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, even though it's something that is a very viable platform, even that everyone does, whether they realize it or not, whether they're playing Candy Crush on their phone or playing Shadow of Mordor like I'm playing here on their PC or PlayStation 4, it's still, everyone thinks of that 80s stigma. And they feel like if you're still gaming now, it's time that you retire your jersey. Now, when he went into high school, this is where things were a little bit different for me. When Ryan went into high school, gaming was considered a nerdy pastime. Now, it's funny with me, I got called out more on gaming being a nerdy thing to do when I was in grammar school or like in 8th grade than in high school. High school was like, yeah, we did other things, and I discovered what beer was in my junior year of high school, but it was more accepted. Like it was interesting too because the PlayStation, the original PlayStation, that was when the original PlayStation was king. It made gaming much more accepted. I really personally saw back then what Sony and the PlayStation brand did for gaming. It made gaming go from something that seemed like a closeted antisocial activity to something that was, I guess you could say, cool and socially accepted. Even back in high school, people were like, oh man, you're playing Jet Moto, that game is sick, or GoldenEye, that game is crazy, you should come over, we should play 4 players this weekend. And it was weird because Sony changed the mindset of what a gamer was more so than I even think like Sega did with the Genesis. They tried with the Genesis, and yeah, they made it more like a young teen thing to do. But I mean, granted, I was a teenager back then, but the PlayStation made it seem socially accepted by any age. Like it was, you could be 30 and playing PlayStation, or you could be 15 and playing PlayStation. It was okay. So he got a lot of the from his classmates, this guy Ryan, like, oh, you're still gaming and you're 15, 16. Shouldn't you be doing something better? You got it from classmates and teachers. I didn't get that much. And I really think it has a lot to do with Sony. Now, he made another interesting point here, is that, he said in his article that he feels games can be works of art, which I believe is true. They could also be goofy as hell, he said, which is true too. But so can shows like The Big Bang Theory, and movies that are comedy movies, but they're still considered relevant, where games, when they do it, people are like, oh, that's just a game with a corny storyline, which some are just corny and some are meant to be corny. They're meant to be funny and corny, but they're just put under a microscope more. The next thing he goes on to discuss is that video games were seen as something you should be growing out of, not something you should be growing with. And I've seen that myself. And it was funny when I was watching or listening, I should say, to the BBC interview The Lizard Squad. They kept on bringing up, oh, what about when that 10-year-old got his PlayStation 4, or the 10-year-old got his Xbox One? And I'm thinking to myself, I know a lot of people my age that bought next-gen consoles for themselves. Why is it that every time a newscaster talks about video games, oh, children, or there was watching on FiOS News, oh, children around the world were angry, and I'm like, when did it become 1988 again? I know more adults that game than kids do. Like, I have friends who have kids that are, 8 or 9 or 10. They don't game, the parents game, or maybe they play Minecraft at best, and they don't, and that's all the kids play, but it's the parents that are going out and buying the AAA titles. But that's the thing, is that still to this day, and it's amazing that a stereotype has kept up for so long, especially with such a young medium, which gaming is still very young, that people still consider it something that little kids do, where you have these 8-bit sprites running around the screen, and it's something you should have grown out of. But the reality of it is that there's more adult gamers than there are children gamers. But for some reason, when an adult, even though there is more adults that play games, when adults talk to other adults about gaming, it's like everyone tries to pretend like they don't really do it. Like, oh, that's something I stopped doing in college. And I moved on to other things. I just don't have the time now. But it's like they're all closeted gamers. Like, it's not socially acceptable to this day, even though it is, and even though everyone's doing it. When it's talked about in public, everyone tries to pretend they moved on from it. Like it's something. It's something you had to move on from. If you do it now, you're a man child or woman child for gaming. So Ryan continued on to say that even his peers at his job at Cinema Blend, people kind of give him like a mocking tone when they talk to him about, oh, what, I heard this in the news, my son got this game and I heard this, or my daughter got this game and I heard this, what do you think about it? Kind of like in a condescending manner. And this is what he says that he says back to them. So what's my usual defense when someone asks me why I still play video games without asking them what they do in their own free time? I usually say that I simply can't imagine going home and tuning out for 3 hours of television on a nightly basis. That tends to get a look of embarrassment or guilt because they grew up in a generation when television was this silly little distraction, and barring any other interest, that's what the vast majority of people do when they go home from work. And it's so true. Not so subtly explaining that my hobby is no more of a waste of time than their own usually brings the conversation to a screeching halt. That's the part that always amazes me about human beings, where one waste of time can be totally acceptable, where I know grown men, and I'm not knocking sports, I'm saying grown men with fantasy football leagues will waste their entire weekends and drive to like resorts to play those games, or drive to a friend's house, and grown married men go sleep at other friends' house to play fantasy football. But if you game for a couple hours a week, oh, man child, still living in his parents' basement, never got laid, man child. But you can watch hours of TV on end every night when you get home from work with a beer in your hand and not move from your couch. You can play hours upon hours of games on your smartphone, but because it's on a phone and it's not on a dedicated console, it's socially acceptable. You can live for a sports team and avoid doing, your adult duties and your adult responsibilities to chase after the sports team and watch everything that they're doing. That's okay. But if you pick up a controller, holy shit, there's something wrong with you. And it's so true. And when you put that mirror up to people's faces who were like that, like, I don't play video games, I'm an adult, and I do this and that. And when you go, oh, dude, don't you watch TV for like 4 fucking hours a night? And they like cower like little dogs, and they like avoid that mirror because, you know, they know you're telling the truth. Like, yeah, your hobby is just as much of a waste of time as mine. It's just more socially acceptable. So sit in the corner and shut up. And it's so true. And I think a lot of people feel pressured because of that. It's like, okay, so I can watch, you know, television shows for hours on end. That's okay, but playing games isn't. And people, I do think, buckle to that pressure. Even if they enjoy gaming, they buckle to it because they want to be accepted by their peers, which is ridiculous. You're talking about people in their 30s. It's not teenagers. Teenagers should buckle to peer pressure, not fucking adults. So to all the men and women out there who are my age that game, who feel this peer pressure, which I don't, I admit it because I'm a stubborn fuck. But if you're feeling this peer pressure because you have family members that question your hobby, or colleagues at your job that question your hobby, or just people in general that are your age saying, oh, I have a wife and kids, I don't want to game anymore, I've moved on from that. Your hobby is just a form of entertainment, just like watching TV, just like going to the movies, just like playing fantasy football. You have a hobby. It's something you enjoy. You're not doing anything illegal. Just game if you enjoy it. If you're bored of gaming, just like people get bored of other hobbies and you're just sick of it, that's different if you want to move on for that reason. But if you want to step away from gaming because you want to make sure you're accepted by your peers, fuck them, man. Do what you only live once, and life is too short. Do what you want to do with your life. Do the things that make you happy. Don't do the things to make other people happy, because at the end of the day, who do you fall asleep with every night? Yourself. You are your own person. Don't make choices that appease other people. Make choices that appease you. And if you truly enjoy gaming, keep doing it, man. I don't care if you're 30, 40, 50, or 60.